Part of why you've been so busy recently, Mike, is that your film project, of course, done alongside your partner, Abby, Gaza Fights for Freedom, has finally been released.
Yeah, that's right. It's on GazaFightsForFreedom.com if you want to watch it. But we're also in the process of planning a nationwide screening tour where Abby Martin and I are going to be traveling in person to cities across the country to screen the film in theaters, which is the best way to see it since we have it like professionally mastered in 5.1 surround sound. So it makes it just kind of a whole different experience to see it in a theater. You'll feel the demonstration in a way you couldn't watching it on your laptop or on your TV. But we're going to be all over the country, and I hope that as many Eyes Left listeners as possible can join me at some of them. It was actually great when we premiered it in Los Angeles. There was several listeners of Eyes Left that came to the premiere and who I got to meet in person. Of course, that was great. But just to throw out a few dates, in September, we're going to be in Sacramento, Phoenix, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Denver, Salt Lake City, possibly Las Vegas and Reno. Then in October, we're going to be in San Jose. October 5th is booked in San Francisco at the Brava Theater. Going to be in Seattle, and then all the East Coast cities, New York, DC, Boston, Philly, going to be in New Hampshire. And then, of course, we're going to be in Canada a little bit, Toronto and Montreal. But then in November, we plan to be in the South through Florida, Georgia, Texas, North Carolina, and all of those. And so I'll be promoting the tour list soon. And so it'd be cool if we could see you face to face there. But Spencer, you had a chance to watch the film, huh?
I did. It was, of course, an incredible work. I think it's, I study history, specifically history of the Middle East. I think it will go a long way in contextualizing the Palestinian struggle for statehood writ large, but also specifically just how inhumane Gaza is, an open air prison. And some of the footage, I mean, it should be said, is quite intense. And you see just, Palestinians of all ages, men, women, and children who are united, trying to, make a claim for their own collective dignity as human beings, and just being absolutely ravaged by the Israeli defense forces. And, even some of the clips, where you could see many of the IDF soldiers who are actually delighting in the way they're inflicting, wanton violence on so many innocent people. I'd also say it's also very effective at disentangling a lot of the Israeli propaganda when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to Hamas. When it comes to the politics of the Middle East, even. And I think the film, through narration and through argumentation, a lot of these nonsensical claims against the Palestinians and what they're presented as are refuted, but also just by nature of the footage itself. I mean, you could kind of see the reality of the situation. So, yeah, I also implore everyone to please get a chance to watch it, either digitally or on any of those touring dates, have a more cinematic experience. I think it's an important film, and I was definitely moved by it, and hopefully it could do some small part in fostering a larger shift in the American consciousness and the world consciousness and understanding, the Palestinian struggle, especially with regards to how it looks on the ground in Gaza.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Spencer, and I'm really happy you watched it. And it's just really great to hear, there's so many subtle details and information, that we were worried would be lost on people. We thought were important. And so it's just great to hear your reaction to it, because you caught all the little things we stuck in there, hoping that it got across to people. And it's just full, every sentence we obsessed over. And so it's full of all the most important details we thought. And you're right. It's when you talk about Gaza, it's so difficult to do documentaries on Gaza, and there's a lot of them out there. I mean, there are a lot of documentaries about Gaza, and so we had the challenge of doing something that wasn't like other documentaries about Gaza, and it's difficult because there is just so much suffering in Gaza. And you really can't just focus on suffering, right? Right. And misery and violence and all of these things. That tends to be all filmmakers can focus on when it comes to Gaza, but there, of course, is so much more, and so we tried our best to show all the other aspects of life in Gaza, but also the power and optimism of the Gaza people, right? If you living under the conditions that they live in, which we can't even get into here, and the film does really just scratch the surface of them. You would think that living under those horrible conditions, that you would just be demoralized and you'd really give up. But I think what the thing that I like most about what we're able to show is that people in Gaza haven't given up. And they're optimistic about the future. They believe that they can be free, and they're in this fight with like love and passion and hope for the future, not out of just desperation and they have nothing else to do. And so we hope that really came across. And like, you know, we had so much intense, crazy footage from the demonstrations, both that our videographers in Gaza shot, but also from so much other footage that exists out there. And we made sure we didn't show any death we didn't show anyone die in the film, even though we had that footage. And so even some of the intense things where I know there's one scene where it looks like someone dies, but we made sure that we didn't show anyone actually who was killed at the demonstrations. And, you know, we used some animation to commemorate people who had died and things like that. But, you know, one of the things, the last thing I wanted to say about it is, you know, since you brought up kind of the history part and, you know, that history section where it was amazing for me because I followed this topic for a long time. You know, I went to Gaza in 2009, right after the war. And so I've seen it myself. But we found all this archival footage from before the Nakba, before the 6/7 war, during, of Gaza. And it was just like incredible shit. Like I could not believe this footage existed. And so we use a lot, you know, we have like about a 10-minute history section in this film, but it really showed me how inaccessible this kind of history is, because that footage, Spenser, all the black and white footage of that era, that to license that footage, it cost $50 a second to license it from Reuters, because it's all owned by Reuters. So in a 10-minute segment, you do the math, how much that costs.
Wow, that's obscene. Yeah,
it's nuts. And they wouldn't compromise on prices. We wouldn't give us a deal. If we're just a grassroots, whatever. So like so much of the money we raised was to be able, but you know. But we felt it was important to be able to and actually it was a lot longer and we had to cut it down to something that was more affordable. But that just shows it's so weird that like history can be inaccessible like that. And this is stuff that no one had really seen before, and no one that I've shown the film to had ever seen that kind of footage before. So I think just for that little section alone, it's kind of a valuable piece of history. And I hope others are able to get as much out of it as we did making it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, one more note, the evidence you provided for the just nature of the Palestinian national liberation movement. I mean, even within the confines of this current world system, I mean, you guys cite a particular section from a United Nations plenary meeting, which, you know, recognizes the universal realization of the right of peoples to self-determination. So, I mean, again, just what's so perverse about it is that even within the confines of the existing world order, what the Palestinians are carrying out should be universally, globally recognized as just and morally upstanding. And yet here we are still trying to have this battle of narratives when on the ground people are suffering in accordance with the rights they're afforded to them, you know, within the existing system, let alone trying to build a more just, you know, world order. You know, if you could take up that perspective, sure, and, you know, both of us do in some capacity, but even given what the world we live in now is, there should be no reason why justice is not meted out in Palestine.
Yeah, you know, that's a great point. Like, if protesters at the Great March of Return were shooting at the IDF troops, that's actually protected, legitimate, legal resistance. I mean, if you're under occupation, occupying forces' military targets are legitimate targets. I mean, they wouldn't be shooting at civilians. They would be shooting at occupying soldiers who are illegally occupying. I mean, that's legitimate. But I think the sad thing is that when the protests, there was two major days where a lot of people were killed, May 14th and June 1st in 2018. And so in those days, you know, like 60 unarmed protesters killed in a single day by Israeli snipers. You know, children, people in wheelchairs, medics, people marked journalists, really egregious war crimes. It got a lot of press those days because it was so egregious it had to be covered. But what many people may have forgotten is that the protests have not stopped. They happen every single Friday. This Friday, there's going to be a protest. Last Friday, there was a protest. And every single protest, the same exact thing happens. People go unarmed. They're killed by Israeli snipers. And in large numbers. And in fact, many children, disabled people, medics, journalists, and all of them are unarmed civilians. But in particular, I mean, very specific, even more protected categories are killed on a weekly basis also. And so this isn't something that just is talking about something that happened last year. Its focus is on 2018, but it's something that is ongoing every single week. And so that's why it's something people should learn about because it's happening and with our tax dollars. I mean, that's so much of our tax money goes to military aid to Israel to buy all those bullets being used, exploding bullets, mind you. You know, it's like crazy that the snipers aren't just shooting people with sniper rounds from rifles. They're using all the bullets they're using are exploding bullets. They're not using anything but exploding bullets. This is just insane. I mean, even when I was in Iraq, Spencer, right, like within like 6 months, some special forces guys got ambushed in the little town I was in. They shot one of the guys that had ambushed them, shot him like in the back of the leg, but they had like those dum-dum rounds, those exploding bullet rounds.
Oh, okay.
And so the guy died, and then they yanked those guys quick out of the country. And they were like, oh shit, this is going to be a big scandal. You used exploding bullets.
Right.
And it was like a big deal, and the guys got in trouble. We didn't know what happened to them. So like even under those circumstances, like, you can't use exploding bullets. And then, you know, the litany of war crimes the U.S. was committing at the time, like that seemed like nothing compared to everything else the U.S. was doing. But it was still like, oh my God, exploding bullets. We can't get caught for this. That's why they rushed them out of the country. Yet the Israeli sniper rifles are only loaded with exploding bullets. It's just a little taste of what the depth that this goes.
Again, you know, when you know you have Palestinians operating within the full range of their rights that the United Nations General Assembly affirms with regards to national liberation, and on the other side you have, you know, Israeli forces using exploding bullets and other, you know, horrific tactics and weapons of war or materials of war. I mean, it's completely absurd. I mean, and it can't do anything else but stir outrage in anyone who has a conscience. Even if you don't study the region, even if you're not as up to snuff on the politics of the Middle East, specifically the Palestinian National Liberation Movement. I mean, it's just absolutely stunning that this continual domination of a people striving for just a shred of dignity is allowed to occur. But I think, nothing is written historically. I think we are hopefully going to see the realization of justice someday. And hopefully, this film will do some part in, again, like as I said before, creating a wider appreciation of the situation over there and, just shining a light on how important this conflict is and how vicious the Israelis have been towards the Palestinians.
Yeah, I hope so too, Spencer. Again, you can go to GazaFightsForFreedom.com to check it out.